Let's open our Bibles this morning to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And I will say this in the beginning. It is not a mistake in the bulletin. I will be using the same passage tonight, except I will be using verse 12 tonight. This morning we're going to use the verses prior to verse 12. I'm going to start in verse 9 to get the full idea. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 9. Neither let us tempt Christ. Wait a minute. I should be let's start with verse 8. I'll get it right in a minute. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happen unto them for ensamples, or that would be the same word that we use, example, just a different spelling. They are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. Father, we come this morning, and Lord, you know everything going on. You know what's going on with Larry there in the ER. You know what's going on in our life. You know what's going on in the life of each and every one that's here. Help us to put those things aside, and may our full attention be focused on the examples that you've given us, both as warnings and also as encouragements. Give me the freedom of speech, and may your Spirit send forth the words with power. And may it please you even today to save some that are lost, to quicken all of us that are saved, and revive us, revive our hearts and our minds, that we might be more like thee. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm one of those people that I learn better by watching. Over the years, we have bought a lot of things that, it says some assembly required. This is not a plug for any particular company. It's not a promotion for any particular product. But over the years, many of the things that we bought have been made by a company called Souder. Some of you may own some of their stuff, but they have the best instructions of anything I've ever put together. They have a picture, point A. Put point A with point B, and then they've got it written out so even I can understand it. Not long ago, well, I say not long, it's been a few months ago, I bought an off-brand, and they didn't have any wording. It was all drawings. Half of the drawings were missing, and you're going from point A to point D, and you're thinking, wait a minute, where is B and C? And finally, I gave up, and my wife came home. I said, I can't figure this out. We got it together, and it appears to be right. But I am much better at watching. Show me how to do it. Don't tell me how to do it. My father-in-law was one of those men that could do anything. He could do electricity, plumbing, auto mechanic. He could do just about anything. And it's like, Jack, can you teach me? And he would start to teach me. And it's like, okay, show me. Show me how to do it. And after a couple of minutes, it's like, get out of the way. I can do it 10 times faster than you can. Just get out of my way. Let me do it. And so that's why I still don't know how to do anything today, because I'm one of those, show me how to do it. Don't tell me, put point A with point B. Show me what point A is. Show me what point B is. Show me how they go together. And there's a very good chance that I will be able to do it later on. But if you say, here are the instructions, read them, and it says, put the perpendicular configuration along with the horizontal thingamajob, and make sure you put the whatchamacallit with the thingamadooey, and it's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Show me. Watch me. Let me do it. Then correct me if need be. Show me what I'm doing wrong, and I will usually figure it out and get it right the next time. You know, that's kind of like the Bible. The Bible tells us what we should or should not do. It's full of instructions how to live the abundant Christian life. But for many people, reading it, even hearing it preached, somehow doesn't get through. One of the nice things, well, nice, sometimes not so nice, one of the things about being pastor is while I'm preaching, I am looking at every one of you. During the course of an average message, I will look at every single one of you anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 times. I will look at every one of you to see if you're listening, to see if you're comprehending, to see if you're paying attention, or if you're playing on your phone or whatever. I'm watching you. I said, he doesn't know what I'm doing. Oh, I probably do. But for many people, me telling you this is what you ought to do, some people just don't get it. So the Bible not only tells us what to do, but it gives us examples of people that did what we are supposed to do. So I want to look at a few examples from the Bible and hopefully give you some living examples of what you and I are supposed to be doing. Now, I start with our text. In verses 1 and 2, the children of Israel had been separated under Moses. You recall the story. They were slaves. God sent 10 plagues, delivered them out of Egypt. God appointed Moses as their leader. And so they left Egypt following after Moses. Now, I do need to point out, because I'm sure some of you are going to catch it, so I'm going to be preemptive. In verse 2, they were all baptized under Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Now, when we think of baptism, we think filling the baptistry up, me getting down in the baptistry, the person coming down, and me taking that individual and burying them in water. The word baptized simply means immersed or covered in. How were they baptized under Moses? Well, it tells us they had the cloud over them, the water surrounding them. They were completely over and side, surrounded. They were completely covered. And that's what Paul says. They were baptized. They were completely covered by unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Now, moving on. Notice in verse 3. They had been abundantly blessed. God had delivered them from Egypt after 10 horrible plagues. The last plague being the death of the firstborn. Picture your oldest child. Somebody said it was only males. Not this time. Later, it became only males. But at this point, the Bible says the firstborn, without reference to male or female. Think of your firstborn child. And at midnight, every person in the country, their firstborn child dies. Israel was spared. Not a single child died in the nation of Israel. They were blessed. They were delivered. They ate the same spiritual meat. God gave them manna every day. Miraculously. They needed water. God brought water out of a rock, and they had rivers of water. God miraculously provided for them. God had blessed them abundantly. And I think I'm safe in saying, if we were to start in back, work our way up front, switch over, go from front to back, I think every one of us would have to say, we have been blessed far more than we deserve. I can look at most of you, and I can tell most of you have not missed very many meals. You don't look like you're dehydrated. You don't look like you're going without clothes. Most of us have nice clothes on. Not just rags, but we have nice clothes. God took care of the children of Israel. Their clothes never wore out, and their shoes never wore out. Not long ago, I put on a pair of shoes, and my wife said, honey, they got holes all in them. They got holes in the side, holes on the bottom. The top has holes in it. Throw them away. Their shoes never wore out. 40 years, God blessed them, fed them, provided for them. What did they do in appreciation? Notice verse 5. With many of them, God was not well pleased. In verse 6, Paul said, these things are written to be an example for us. In verse 6, they lusted after evil things. And I wasn't sure exactly because, what's evil for one, you may think of something else. So I looked it up to see what evil things were. And it's anything that is strictly forbidden, but it goes beyond that. It's anything that is not good for you. Now, some of you who know me real well, one of my pet peeves, and I grew up to where my uncles all smoked, my grandparents, my granddads both smoked. My dad never did, but most of his brothers did. So I grew up inhaling secondhand smoke. My granddad used to roll his own cigarettes, and I grew up with that. My one grandfather died of cancer from smoking. I lost an uncle to smoking. I lost another granddad indirectly connected with smoking. So I grew up where people that smoked died. I said, we're all going to die. They died much younger than expected, much younger than anticipated. Evil is anything God forbids, but it's anything that is not good for you. I mentioned smoking, and I understand addiction. I have dealt with it, not personally, but in others. I do know that God's grace can help you overcome, but it can include any number of things. Anything that is not good for you spiritually and not good for you physically is something that you need to shun. Well, he goes on. They were idolaters. Oh, that means they bowed down and worshiped idols. Not necessarily. Paul explains so that nobody can misunderstand. Paul explains what the idolatry was. In verse 7, they sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Those are the three things Paul specifically mentions as being forms of idolatry. See, we have been conditioned to think that idolatry is where you have an idol and you bow down and, go head to chest, arm, shoulder to shoulder. That's idolatry. Paul says there's another form of idolatry, and it's eating and drinking and putting pleasure ahead of the things of God. What's wrong with eating? Nothing. I kind of enjoy it. Looks like most of you do. I was talking to some friends last night, and we were talking about eating, and they said, "Oh, you're going to get some dessert." And I said, "You haven't heard, obviously. Back in March, I was diagnosed as diabetic, so I don't get to eat like I used to eat. I mean, used to. I could eat a whole pie and thoroughly enjoy it. Especially if you take a slice of pie, put a half gallon of ice cream on it. Man, I was in hog heaven just about. But eating had become a form of idolatry. Eating came before God. Now, I'm going to step on a lot of toes. I can't come to church because I have to eat before I come. Now, if you're diabetic, okay, I'll buy that, maybe. But wait a minute, I can't serve God because I have to eat first. So you're putting eating ahead of serving God. No. Yeah, that's exactly. They made an idol out of eating, which is anything that we put before God. Drinking. Now, they keep telling me that I need to drink more. I don't drink enough. I don't know. I'm not a water person. And they keep saying, you need to drink water. Gag. Who can just turn up and drink water? Gag. I know a lot of people do. I know you do. But water to me is just, but that's not what he's talking about. It's talking about drinking to the point that it becomes a controlling factor. It controls me. I think in context with other scriptures, he's talking about sitting down and just drinking alcohol, coffee, whatever, to the point that that's all you live for, is eating and drinking. And then the third thing is they rose up to play. Pleasure. What comes first in your life, pleasure or God? Now, I know that's a tough one for some of us. What is more important, pleasure or serving God? Children of Israel put pleasure ahead of serving God. And notice what happened because of their sin. God overthrew them in verse 5. God there fell one day 23,000. They were destroyed by serpents. They were destroyed by the destroyer. In other words, God killed them because they put eating, drinking, and pleasure ahead of God. God killed them. You know, I'm not God, and I learned years ago. I'm a slow learner, so it took me several years. My job is to preach the word. I cannot make anyone obey. I cannot enforce upon anyone. My job is to preach, and then it's up to you to live and accept as long as it's Bible. Now, very quickly, let's move on to some other examples. In John chapter 13, we find Jesus taking off his normal robe, putting his normal robe aside, putting on a servant's girdle, and getting down and washing the feet of the disciples. Think about it. He was their master. He was their Lord. He was the Son of God. And yet, he lowered himself to wash the feet of the disciples. I'm told that was a job that was normally reserved for the lowest of servants. You know, the high servants, they got to serve the master at the table, bring his food, test it, make sure. The lower the servant, the lowest servants were stuck washing the feet of the guest. Nobody wanted to be found washing everybody else's feet. It was considered a very low job. And yet Jesus said, as ye have seen me do, and I'm paraphrasing, this is what you need to do. You need to be willing to become a servant. Well, I'm not washing anybody's feet. Then you've completely missed the lesson that Jesus gave. It's not just about washing feet. It's the lesson, the example. He said, I'm leaving you an example. Not just washing feet, but an example of humility. I remember in college, boys were not allowed at the girls' dorm unless we were there on some kind of official business and were accompanied by a faculty or, the dorm mother or somebody. So one day the ladies' toilet backed up, and one of the teachers said, hey, can you come with me? We need to go over and unstop the girls' commode. It's like, sure, that's fine. You probably don't remember this. No, she doesn't remember. Maybe you weren't there yet. But anyway, the teacher that went with me was one of those where he didn't like to get his hands dirty. He didn't like to get dirty. He was not one that liked to do any kind of dirty job. So it's like, okay, we tried the normal stuff. Nothing worked. He said, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look at the sink and see, if I can see anything in the sink. You go over to the commode and plunge it real good. And I go over and I plunge it, and it spewed up out of the sink all over him. I thought it was hilarious. He didn't appreciate it very much. How willing are you to get down in the dirt? I've told many of you, some of you have not heard, my sophomore year, I was working with Brother Harold Harvey as his assistant. So, they had a work day at church, and I'm all ready. I'd go up there. I'm Brother Harvey's assistant. Now, this is before indoor plumbing. We had an old outhouse. Some of you remember that. Brother Harvey thought this young kid needs to learn a lesson in humility. Some of you have heard this. Bear with me. He handed me a shovel and said, go clean out underneath the outdoor toilets. And it's like, you're kidding. I'm your assistant. Assistants don't do that. Yeah, you did with Brother Harvey. I had to go and talk about ruining. I'll deal with pride tonight. Talk about humiliation. You ever tried cleaning out under a outhouse without getting it on you? It's almost impossible. Jesus said, I am by example, I'm giving you an example of humility. He became a servant. In James chapter 5, James tells us that we have heard of the prophets and how that they endured affliction. And I just finished reading last week. Friday, in fact, I just finished reading the book of Jeremiah. How many of you have read Jeremiah? Most of you. Good. Okay. You know, if you've read Jeremiah, he suffered a lot of affliction. He was ridiculed. He was mocked. He was made fun of. He was thrown in prison. He was thrown into a deep pit and left to die. He was threatened with death many times. And yet James said he endured affliction with patience. I'm almost scared to read the news anymore. I think it was last week. Somebody shot somebody and killed them because they did something they didn't like. There was another case where they were at some function, they played the Star-Spangled Banner, and this person did not stand up. And so another person went over and slapped him upside the head. We have zero tolerance. But what if you are on the receiving end of it? All you've done is take a stand for Christ. Hey, after work, why don't we stop by at Joe's Bar and Grill and have a couple of drinks? No, thank you. I'm a Christian. I'm going home to my wife and family. I know a man that did that, and boy, did they persecute him. You think you're too good to drink with us? No, I'm just a Christian, and I don't drink alcohol as a beverage. Notice they were patient back in James. James specifically mentioned Job as an example of patience. Job lost everything. Then he was afflicted bodily, covered with sores from his head to his feet. His affliction, if we study Job chronologically, his affliction lasted for many months, maybe even a year or more. He suffered physically. And then his three closest friends came and accused him of all kinds of things. And yet James held Job up as an example of patience. Now, I have to remind myself, I don't have it nearly as bad as Job did. I have my bad days, and then I have badder days, and then I have baddest days. But even on my worst day, I don't have anything like Job had. Yes, he had his down days. There were days he cursed the day he was born. There were days he accused God falsely. He had days of discouragement. But overall, he said in Job 13, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. In Job 19, though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see Jesus. Job is our example. Some of us have never been sick. God bless you. I hope you never get sick. But some of us have not been blessed with perfect health. Job is an example. Even though he had it far, far worse than I ever have, he still overall maintained his faith in God. 1 Peter chapter 2, we find Jesus again. And I'm not going to read it, but Peter talks about how that Jesus was beaten. He talks about how that Jesus was falsely accused. And yet, he never replied in anger. Somebody does something to you. How do you reply? I'm going to get even if it's the last thing I do. Or, you know what? Let's meet out back and we'll settle this once and for all. Jesus is our example. When he was rebuffed, he opened not his mouth. When he was falsely accused, he did not get angry and lash out with his tongue. In fact, Peter says he uttered not a word. Well, in 2 Peter, we find Peter mentions Sodom and Gomorrah. God destroyed them, wiped them off the face of the earth because of their perversion of sin, particularly immorality. When we think of Sodom and Gomorrah, we typically think of homosexuality. But not everybody was a homosexual. The rest of the town just kind of went along with it. And they were destroyed just like the homosexuals. I couldn't help but think of America. We are on that verge, if not already there. We have allowed immorality to be accepted as normal. While we don't condone the LGBTQ plus movement, we don't stand against it. We don't preach against it. We just kind of close our eyes and hope it'll go away. Well, 1 Timothy, Peter gives us an example of believers in general. And to summarize it, the world is watching you. Don't tell me you're a Christian. Show me. I don't care what you say. I want to see it in your life. Don't tell me how much you love God. Show me by your dedication to Him, to His Word, and to His house. I've often said, if I have to tell you that I'm a Christian, I've done a really lousy job of being an example. You should not have to ask, are you a Christian? They should know by my life, by my conversation. If you're here today and you're lost, the example that we have over and over and over is God punishes sin. There in the book of Jude, Jude mentions God cast out a third of the angels because they chose to rebel against Him. God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of their actual sin and their I just lost the word. They're going along with and accepting sin. God destroyed Israel because of their idolatry and their rebellion. Someone said not long ago, you can't scare people into heaven. And they're absolutely right. But as a preacher, I do have an obligation to tell you what you're in for if you die without Christ. I have an obligation to tell you if you die without Christ. There are many examples of people that died without Christ who immediately lifted their eyes in hell. God punishes sin.